I have to up my politeness game here. I always thought I was on the bleeding edge of being a really good person out in the public and not being angry when I'm driving, and I've got to pull myself back and be even nicer than I thought I needed to be here.
Hello, OneSunnyDay.com podcast. Today my guest is Jeff Eleveld, and we're going to be speaking about moving from the big city to the relative country. Hello, Jeff.
How you doing?
How are you doing? So, tell us where you lived originally, and then where you moved to, and what the differences were.
Born, raised essentially in Hamilton, Ontario. Lived as far out as Mississauga, so the town next is Burlington. I've lived there. I've lived in Oakville. I've lived in Mississauga. That's as far as I ever stretched it. And then last summer decided probably time to get out of the real estate market. It was seeming to be at a high, although it's even higher now. So decided to look around. I was going to go to Calgary or I was going to go to New Brunswick. Those were my two options in my brain. And I was looking at realtor.ca and looking at both places. And all of a sudden, it just kept being drawn further and further to New Brunswick and Fredericton area. The neighbor, right, who lived behind us, their daughter went to University of New Brunswick and Fredericton here and loved it, said wonderful things about it. So that's where I started looking. It's Fredericton, and it's the capital of New Brunswick, and it's they're trying to be a bit sort of high-tech-ish. I guess they give some tax incentives to tech companies that come here, and since they're the capital, they're sort of more of a government kind of town. And so I decided to come here, and the prices were ridiculously good.
So, to just let people know, but how many people lived where you were before, and like how many people live in the town you are now?
Okay, well, I guess the Golden Horseshoe area is sort of how you would consider it. Toronto, Hamilton, Niagara is sort of the, I don't know, probably what would be there, about 6 million or something like that in that kind of area. Something around that number, certainly more than 4 and probably less than 8. So Hamilton itself is probably 500,000-ish people, and I've lived in Ancaster, just in the outskirts of Hamilton, and here it's, I don't know, probably 130,000, 140,000 people in Fredericton.
So it goes from a big city, traffic jams, 4-lane highways, strip malls in every corner, right? That's that a fair description? And then the journey out there is how far? Just so people get a sense of how far away that is.
About 13 to 14 hour drive if you sort of drive straight through, just stopping to get gas kind of thing. That's the drive.
So lots of people probably thinking about this now. Lots of people probably thinking, with the COVID and the lockdown, with all these things, what am I doing living in a place where there's no backyard? What am I doing? You know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera. And thinking, this, if I was ever going to, get out of the city and move out there, this is the time. So what's your experience moving out there? And then who do you think it's for and who do you think it's not for?
I guess it's not for somebody who needs a job that you've got to stick around for. If your area of expertise is very sort of honed and specific, and you're a certain type of engineer or doctor, although they need doctors here like crazy, that's certainly one of the, we should talk about that later. One of the negatives here in New Brunswick is the medical system seems to be, because I'm from the Hamilton area and there's hospitals on every street corner almost. So that's a noticeable difference here. But if you can remotely commute to your work, even if you had to go into the office twice a month, I would almost suggest during non-COVID kind of times that you'd be able to hop on a plane, go to your office, do your stuff, get back here, and live cheaper based on the fact that you've had to fly twice a month into Toronto and do your meetings because it's so inexpensive. About on the order of about a third the prices for housing that it was in Ancaster, Hamilton kind of area.
Just to ballpark that for people who are listening from all over the place. So a lot in this area, in the outskirts, is now about $1 million with no house on it. some houses in the area where I am sold, and the house was irrelevant. They're going to demo it, but the lot was going for 950,000 dollars just by itself, which is lunacy, right? But it's also the thing which makes you go, hey, if I what can I buy out there? So if you can buy your house that's a million, and then or you sell your house that's a million and buy a house that's 300,000, and your mortgage, you can easily see lots of scenarios where you either have lots of capital to start things or mortgage free, or et cetera, et cetera. So now it's not apples to apples, right? You just don't have to make as much money if you're not paying a mortgage. There's not as much pressure there, right?
I wouldn't want to be a person in New Brunswick wanting to move to Ontario because it would be so obtusely expensive. You wouldn't even think that that's reasonable. Coming this way, it's like you said, it was downhill driving. It was so easy. I sold the house, split it in half. I took half and bought a house and had money left over.
Well, I mean, this is what people are going to know, right? So there was no, I mean, this seems like an obvious question, I think, to you and to once you've done it, but just so people know, what are you going to get into? Were there any administrative sort of problems that you discovered, or because it's Canada was just seamless?
Reasonably seamless. I mean, COVID, you had to sort of stop at the border. I had to buy the house I'm in here, sight unseen. I saw it on video from the realtor and obviously lots of pictures. But I had to get a home inspector and he sent me pictures, but that's so I had to go on. I Google Earth and look at the neighborhood and street view, and you do a lot of that, but you don't really have the sense of what it's like until you get here. And I was considering coming here first and trying to rent something for 2 or 3 or 4 months, and then once I'm here, look to buy and then purchase. But I found a pretty nice house, and I quite liked a lot of things about it, and so I bought it and showed up day one, and had to quarantine for 2 weeks, and loved the house. It was a fantastic purchase. So happy with my realtor. It's actually having them over for dinner and at the end of April. So once all these COVID, it's a lot easier here for COVID than it is in Ontario. We're pretty light here. It's always been light, but that's because the people here take it incredibly serious. I've heard of no one whining about, well, I don't want to wear a mask. This is ridiculous. Remember just after quarantine, the weather got really nice in mid-November here. Went for a walk around the lake that's 2 kilometers from the house. Walking around the lake and didn't have a mask on because I'm thinking I'm walking outside. And every single person I came walking around any corner, they're all wearing a mask, sort of looking at me funny. And that was my bad. Now I wear a mask if I even go for a walk. The only time I don't, there's woods right next to the house. If I go for a walk down there, I won't wear a mask out there. But you hardly run into anybody anyways down the woods next to the house.
Right. Well, you definitely get sort of cultural pockets, right? And I think one of the questions that a lot of people are going to have moving from the city out, and nobody knows the answer to this, but what is coming back for the city? Like New York is by hearsay testimony, basically, it looks like the proverbial bomb went off. Things are shuttered everywhere. There's garbage in the streets. The services have broken down, and that breaks, this breaks the old contract with the city, right? The contract with the city was, well, I live in a small place, but it doesn't matter because I'm never there. I'm at the cafe, I'm at a restaurant, or I'm at work, or I'm at a bar with my friends. So it's kind of the old French Parisian apartment, right? They're small, but they're never there. So what does it matter? You're just sleeping there and making yourself, coffee, and that's it. So, but if the amenities are gone, right? If the amenities are gone from that area now and they're not coming back anytime soon, then there becomes a real question: what am I doing here, right? Because now I'm living in a small place. The contract is kind of dead. The amenities don't exist, right? And you're more likely to be off from that. So there's a big question: what comes back? I mean, contrary to popular opinion, there's no reason that the city has to exist at all. There's plenty of places in the States where most of the commerce is done in strip malls. People just drive to strip mall. So I don't know. I don't necessarily know that you can sort of in the big city say for sure that the model of the city with the subway reconstructs itself, right? It could be that places like that end up much better off, is my point.
Well, I think with SpaceX's Starlink, that will set a change in motion for rural areas in places like New Brunswick, where you would never have considered living because you can't get internet, or it would be so bad. You hear people's hell stories about trying to connect to a satellite and having 2 second delay times. And 2 seconds seems like nothing until you actually have to use 2 second delay time. Then it's everything. Um, the fact I've ordered a Starlink, I've got 1 gigabit symmetrical here, up down. It's ridiculously fast, but I still ordered it because I know there's people around here who desperately need it, who are on the outskirts, who live in places next to the lakes, who just can't get good internet. And so I want to be able to hook that up and be able to, maybe multiply that out to a couple of different places. But I really see Starlink as something that will allow little teeny communities to start growing in different areas like crazy. As long as you can get hydro there, and maybe even now with the solar becoming so reasonable, and batteries running your house reasonable, that people could live off grid almost happily now compared to before, where it was a struggle. I tend to think.
I think the other thing that occurred to me is another big game changer is the kind of ubiquity of Amazon and these services, right? Whereas the previous rural problem is if you were up at our cottage, for example, I mean there's no way to, for example, get a laptop repaired, or like that was 2 hours away round trip to get to a place that would just like receive your laptop and ship it to somebody else. So I mean, you you really get. I mean, I did know that you could argue it's kind of a mindset problem, but I would have like, hey, I'm building this computer. I want this piece of photography equipment or sound, whatever it was, and I did have locked in my head the notion. Well, that's messing around on the computer for a little bit to locate it, and it's at worst a drive. You know what I mean? Whatever esoteric piece. Let's say you wanted some high speed memory or something like this. It was at worst a drive. It was locatable between here and the GTA. If you're willing to drive for 45 minutes, you could get anything when you wanted immediately. And then so that would previously go away, but Amazon and eBay and these like services seems to be have replaced that. Here at least, the speed is so great that I would now go, what am I doing wasting my time in the store? you know Looking through racks, or I mean, they've really, for good or for ill, created this loop. Now, is that the same thing out there? Can you order something, get it in a couple days or a day?
I don't get the day turnaround like I used to in Hamilton. I'd get things where I'd order at 10 o'clock at night, and the next day at 10 in the morning, it's sitting at my door. They were fulfilling that, I think, from Oakville, and that doesn't happen. But I can get probably 2 day or 3 day. I think it comes out of Quebec, near Quebec City. They have a place there. But there's a lot of things where I order them and it'll be a week before I get them. And I tend to think that wasn't the case even in Hamilton. It would be faster. Although my AliExpress, when I order directly from China, I seem to get it quicker here than I was ever getting in Hamilton. I don't know why that would be.
Because it's closer to China. It's obvious.
We can't be closer to China. We're further away from China.
I know. Well, it depends which way you bring the boats. If you bring them west,
The Earth, maybe it's exactly. I think Indonesia is below us, or
that's the next project. If you could just get a tunnel through the Earth, this whole Suez Canal thing,
Hyperloop.
Hyperloop. We'll see. I think Elon has enough irons in the fire. He's got to take one of these things down a notch and like come back to Hyperloop. Though I think they're talking about doing. I mean, don't put ideas in his head, but I think they were talking about doing the underground tunnels. He's doing the underground tunnels, and then someone's like, you could just take the air out of these suckers, and you'd have this below ground Hyperloop. Um, let's just hope nothing goes wrong. But I think that was thrown around that you could just put the two ideas in. There's no reason not to have the subterranean tower and just suck the air out of that and then Hyperloop that.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it when, and he said they were talking in L.A. They want to put one underground, and people, what about earthquakes? What about earthquakes? It's gonna, and he goes, no, it's like water. Earthquakes don't affect underwater, and essentially, ground when you're 50, 60 feet down, it's gonna act like water. It just absorbs everything around it like the water would.
Well, it's kind of an odd fear because if you're worried about earthquakes, I'm not sure that raised highways, is the place to be in an earthquake. And like out there in California, these are your options, friends. It's either like a raised highway or underground. There's no, even if you're on a highway, it's got underpasses, overpasses, all of these things, right? And so, I mean, that's this whole rural versus cities divide. See, I don't know. People seem to think. I think a lot of people seem to think that history is an arrow, and there's some target to history. Like it has this goal out there. My savage line is always people see the new version of Blade Runner, and they go, finally somebody gets it. Like here's the future, right? It's people. I mean, and the main character, what I thought was really interesting is that he's got like a small apartment, but it's not cruel. You know what I mean? There's a little area to eat. I don't know if you've seen the movie before. There's a little area to eat, a little kitchen. It's like a vision of the future. But when you see his apartment, you're not like, this is so cruel. It's small, it's sort of efficient, but it's not so cruel that you think this is unlivable, right? It's like the dining area is the only kind of work area, but he still has a separate bedroom. The kitchen is somewhere else. You know what I mean? And there's always people like hanging out in the hallway as like this sort of public activation space. But I don't think that this vision of the future that someone's put out there, and they're like, well, this is the future, and we're all sort of lemoning towards it, is necessarily true. Because if you take Hamilton, Hamilton used to have the biggest streetcar network of any place in the world, right? It used to be the one of the richest places. Yeah, it had the biggest streetcar network of anywhere in the world. And all that has to happen is times change. People decide they don't like that. You know what I mean? And 50 years later, nary a streetcar track, right? And so I don't think the cities are necessarily this uh, uh, blinding one-way calculation where people are like headed mindlessly for the cities, right? I think there's all sorts of configurations. Now it might be in other areas, that's all you can manage because of the geography of the place or whatever, right? But that's certainly not the situation in North America or Mexico or you know or most of from Canada to Mexico. There's lots of flat land to sort of build on, sort of thing. So I'm not entirely sure that we're not going to just see the cities being the place. Everybody heads towards the cities. All the money's in the cities. New York would be a perfect example of this, right? All the money pours into the cities. It sort of gentrifies out, right? And then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where everybody's trying to get close to the money, close to the sort of center of action. I think once that's shattered, I don't see. I think once it's headed the other way, once we're doing we're moving out to the country, I don't see what naturally reverses that. You know what I mean? I don't see that in 20 years we're not going to be like, oh, now it's obvious the ultimate place to be is spread out with a backyard. You know, the fourth virus has rolled through whatever now, and we're like, okay, we can see that model's dead as dead. You know what I mean? I think that's on the table. I don't see why if you were a strategic planner, you wouldn't go, we have to really have on the table, the city is dead, public transit is dead, no one's ever getting on these buses again. This is just reality. I mean, we don't even have to get into, do people want to do it or not? They're not going to go. And um, like how many times would you have to get tagged? Just this is, I mean, this exists right now. You're on the bus, you go somewhere on the bus, and they're like, oh, well, we use some technology to figure out you're on the bus. You got to stay in your house for 2 weeks. Like, how many times are you going to do that? Right. Before people are like, forget it.
Yeah, I mean that's real. I mean, we're figuring that out with COVID. I mean, we figure out where the limits are, and you see the sort of breaking points. I know in the States they're a lot more anxious to get over it. I know people there in Pennsylvania that had COVID and now walk around like they're indestructible and don't care about a thing. And they were very left leaning, wear your mask, be good. And they got COVID because they had too many people over at their house. Like they went, well, it's not going to happen to us. We'll wear masks. Everybody should wear masks, but that old sort of adage, in Ontario, you think of Americans as rude and Ontarians as Canadians were politer. I now look at Ontarians as rude and New Brunswickites or whatever we're called as much politer. I have to up my politeness game here. I always thought I was on the bleeding edge of being a really good person out in the public and not being angry when I'm driving, and I've got to pull myself back and be even nicer than I thought I needed to be here. It's just everybody's so sweet and nice about everything. I had a lady pull out in front of me and it slammed on my brakes. And normally you're really mad, and I was about to get really mad, and she's like, "Oh, sorry," and she like looks at me like, and it was just so sweet the way she was, and you just can't get mad at that. And that's, I think that's how everything goes here. There is no the reason that people don't get like that. There are no traffic jams. I mean, I have a joke, and it's so far real. The biggest traffic jam I've been at is at a red light with 3 cars in front of me. And that's in rush hour traffic coming out of downtown Fredericton. It's that they don't have the thing that causes the angst. That doesn't exist here. So even with COVID, it just seems so relaxed and so nice, and people are so friendly. And I don't know if it's the friendliness creates the city or the city creates the friendliness, or the fact that you, like, I go out of my little area where I live, turn left instead of right. Right goes into Fredericton, left. Within 2 kilometers, you'd believe you're in Muskoka, where it's all rocky and trees and then a lake and like that. But I'm 2 minutes away from it. It gives you something.
So to get back to what you said, does a friendship create the place create the friendly atmosphere? So Matthew McConaughey, I was watching an interview on his new Green Light book, and they asked, "Oh, well, what are you doing next?" And he said, "Well," and he was, "Well, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to be an ambassador for the city." And they were like, what do you mean you're an ambassador for the city? He's like, "Well, there's certain rules." Place escapes me now. It's where Joe Rogan went. What's the place? That place, Austin, right? So yeah. So he's like, "I'm going to be an ambassador for Austin because, for example, in Austin, you," and he just sort of gave this example. You see people talking to their neighbors, and we don't get that miffed about politics. That's just not what we do here. And I thought to myself, it's kind of amazing that he's the healthiness or the I guess unhealthiness, who knows, but he's like, "Okay, I've lived in Austin all my life. There's newcomers come in. I'm going to define how you act here. Just myself. I'll take it upon myself and say, we can get into an argument about it, but I'm going to define, like, this is how you act here, and this is not how you act here, right?" And and sort of just played that, like, I'm an ambassador to Austin. This is what Austin is. And I'm like, it's anyone's, it's anyone's mantle to take, right? You can just say, "I'm the ambassador of Austin," and if 10,000 people show up at your house, you're like, "You don't speak for us." You're like, "Well, I guess I lost my ambassador position." But as long as other people are like, "No, we believe in what this guy says," and I just thought it amazing to be like, "We're going to take this place. I'm just going to say, I've been here for, this is how you act, this is how you don't act," and define it, instead of kind of the looseness you get. You just get this social norm. Everyone's wearing masks, and you're like, whatever the science of it, it doesn't matter. Everyone's wearing masks. I'm new here. I got to go with the flow, or I'm going to be pariah number one, right? And so you get those aspects, right? And I mean, there's no reason, Canada especially, but most places, that most of the complaint about distributed populations in rural areas is, we call that sprawl, right? So that's what they call it. So, well, everyone's all sprawled out. New England is the classic. Here, look at the problem, right? Because it's not where in the GTA where all the growth is compressed against the lake. People say, "Okay, well, that's sprawl." My understanding is that's not really sprawl. That's an ever increasing urban boundary. It's just growing, 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 growing. But it's growing from a point, right? Sprawl is kind of like metastasized cancer, where every little town lights up from pews. Just every little town lights up and is getting built around, and there's no cohesive construction to it. But uh, if people are going to work once a week in the office, how damaging is that really? That they're driving on little rural highways. I've never bought, because there's going to be a push. If you ask me, there's going to be this push to say, no, the city can't die. The city is the future. We have to get people in the city. We have to subsidize whatever the transit spending is, double it, trip. You know what I mean? We You can see this in the Canada plans, right? Like there's already this like 2027 push for transit funding. A little bit concerning. It's in 2027, but um, um, you wonder what spreadsheet taught them that 2027 was the year to reboot transit. But they're going to be continually pushing this model, and there doesn't seem to be this interest in going, why do people not like that model? What about this model isn't working? You know what I mean? They're resisting it, right? If people weren't resisting the model, it wouldn't have to be subsidized, right? Like nobody's subsidizing, like yeah, nobody's subsidizing Uber. That's a perfect example. Now, the people are going to make this argument. Well, the roads are subsidized in some creepy way, and they say the parking lot is subsidized in some way. And the problem with that argument is I just don't think it's true. If you take the gas taxes, it pays for a lot of this infrastructure. And even if you wanted to say I don't drive anywhere, like I'm not part of this system, well, your bike came on a transport truck. Your food is coming on a transport truck. I don't know what dimension you think you live in, but everything is coming on a transport truck. That's how the last mile is getting to. You see the loading docks everywhere. Well, you're not bicycling up to the loading dock. Here's a skid of tomatoes. Is my classic line, right? And then my second one is I've never in my life seen someone walk down the street with a 24 case of pop. Never. I've never seen someone like, I'm going to the grocery stop. I got my bag, but I want pop, so I'll just carry this down. I've never seen it once, right? So you could.
I seen beer on a bike.
I've seen beer on a bike. Listen. I get the beer problem. I get the beer problem. The guy's like,
The beer thing, it's different.
the beer. I get the beer problem. It's Canada, so it's only in certain stores. So I got to get to the store, and I'm bicycling back. So I get the beer on the bike, but I don't see the model. The model flushing out. So you do. Speaking of which, so you do sort of lack that big box, sort of like Costco. Um, that'd be a question. Is there that sort of mass consumer Costco style event?
There's Costco here. This is the size of Ancaster and Dundas together, and which are two small towns outside of Hamilton. And I lived in Ancaster, and so I thought, oh, there's like 120,000, 130,000 people. It's going to be pretty. That's the biggest Canadian Tire I've ever seen in my life, and it's right next to a Kent, which is sort of a lumber kind of store. It's the best of Home Depot, and there's Home Depot here too. So like, and the other ones are like 5 kilometers away from the house. It's about a 15-minute drive to get to the Costco. It's in the very south of the city, and I'm in the very north of the city. The St. Johns River runs right through the middle of the city. But yeah, there's a Costco here. You feel like you're not missing any of the amenities of the big city, other than the one you spoke of, which was I can go find a NVMe drive. I want a 2 terabyte now, and I want to upgrade. So you wait 3 or 4 days and you get it off of Amazon. Amazon's been my friend for sure. Lots of Amazon deliveries. I actually buy foodstuffs from Amazon, which I never did before and there are lots of grocery stores here. Sobeys seems to be the reigning champ. Everything's based on that. But there's some of the co-op places and obviously Costco. And so I like buying lots of stuff from Costco, and the local Sobeys 2 kilometers away from the house. Like it's.
Well, I have the exact same thing, because like before COVID, I would desperately try not to buy things from Amazon. Just not that I have any problem with the system, but because I have customers that deal with Amazon, I find they're very harsh on the suppliers. You can get people who've done executed perfectly for years and years and years, and there's like one problem, and they're like, hey, 3 people are upset, and they're like, didn't I just ship 100, 10,000 things last month? You know what I mean? Like, could we factor that in? And they just don't. They're like, there's these 3 upset people, sir. This is code red. We're closing your store. Closing your store down. You got to kind of like desperately beg back. You don't feel like you get a fair a fair hearing from them. It's kind of like, well, you're a problem, and the solution is whatever. So I desperately tried to avoid shopping in Amazon and help like local businesses kind of thing, and help it. And the problem with the interaction with that and the COVID is not so much the mask. The masks are irritating, but it's not a game changer really in your experience in a store. But I find the grindiness of the store really oppressive. You know what I mean? It's like everybody seems to be in a bad mood. Nobody's chatting. There's always somebody snarling, and they have like their eyes are freaked out, and you're like, I just can't deal. And the weird thing is, I don't have to deal. I can just clickety click, and it comes to my front door. And lately, actually, I got I forget what started it up, but I ended up signing up to this Instacart grocery delivery service. I'm sure it'll be out there soon enough. And at first, I'm like, yeah. And so, do they have that out there? I don't know what they.
When you're under quarantine, you can't leave the house, right, for the first 2 weeks. So the real estate agent filled the fridge for me. So when I like showed up, I had all the groceries that I wanted. Gave her a list, so that was perfect. And then the rest is Instacart. You just order from Instacart for the first 2 weeks, so you can get out of here.
Right, exactly. There's no way to get things. We do the same thing because what happens is that my wife works at the hospital, and you get various states. Someone in the office is COVID, and you're waiting for your anyway. You get in these states where you're not allowed to literally not allowed to leave the house. So you need groceries. What are you going to do? So you end up ordering through this Instacart system, and it's expensive. I have noticed there's a price increase in all the products, and you pay delivery and whatever, and it's an expensive service. But what I've discovered is that just for me personally, I can't take the grindiness of the store. I just can't. I just go in there. Everybody's miserable. They're standing in lines. There's people snapping at you, like, come on, like and at the local Costco's, there's like a bullhorn people walking around. Please wear your mask at all times. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm like, pretty sure everyone's aware of that. I just don't think I don't think it missed. I don't think that that it escaped anyone's notice. I see no one in there now. Like, what is with the mask thing? Could there have been a poster? I mean, what's going on? Why is everyone wearing the mask?
An awareness campaign of some type.
Yeah, exactly. Could they have just sent like nothing? There was nothing at all. I'm just wandering around with no mask. Everyone has a mask, and I'm just asking questions. As you know, oh, bullhorn lady, thanks. Oh, that's it. There's a thing. Where would I get these masks? COVID, you say? What's that? No, doesn't exist. But I'm like, we just don't need it, right? It's like everybody knows the deal, and so I'm just like, oh, I can't take it, and it's worth money for me to get out of having to take it. And the Instacart provides that. Plus, I also somehow think I'm saving a little bit of money with the Instacart.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how because it's more expensive, but I think especially Costco, you get that problematic impulse purchase. You're like, oh, look, oh, that'd be nice to have. My tires don't inflate themselves, right? Like this could really solve my tire inflation problem. And then the next thing you know, you got this thing you didn't really need. So yeah, so that's going to be another if you ask me, completely transformative thing. And the downside to this is, I mean, if you want to see a gap just between people living and a gap between their living standards, between sort of the rich and the poor, whatever you want to call it, just wait till this grocery delivery system kicks in. Because I mean, previous to this, how rich did you have to be to not have to get your own groceries? You could live. This was my line to. I was talking to one of my buddies previous, and I said you could make a lot of money, have a flash house, on Lakeshore, and you're still picking dead birds up off your lawn. Like you're like, hey, I'm an executive at so and so, but you're getting a shovel and shoveling up the dead bird, and then you're like,
Your own dog's poop. Yep.
yep, honey, we need groceries. You have to be super rich to get out of the dead bird and poop problem, right? Um, but to me, this is just going to create an ever greater bifurcation of people who don't even have to go to the store.
Yeah, I mean, I never really thought of it that way. You always hear actors and actresses in Hollywood go, "Oh, and I went grocery shopping," and the person who's interviewing them goes, "You grocery shop by yourself on your own?" And they go, "Yeah, of course I do." And even there, where we put them up on a pedestal and imagine they live in mansions and have servants waiting on them hand and foot, they still do it. So it is going to be a step out if we're not getting our own groceries, or we get used to the Amazon model so endemic as to how we live that we change our going out habits to be visiting friends, and that's it. You know what I mean? We don't have to work by going out anymore. We don't have to. That's why the whole idea of mass transit to me is so in flux. The thought of I don't know if you've been following the whole Tesla thing with the automated driving, and they want the robo taxis to be doing it. It becomes Uber on steroids. And if that actually happens, the 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 idea of what happens to mass transit, because that solves up so many different problems all at once. And the one that people don't even realize, it solves the power grid problem. Like the power grid problem we have is in the middle of summer, we need an incredible amount of electricity, and they got to turn on a bunch of peaker plants and you get as much electricity as we can heat up our air conditioners. And then there's times where they have to turn everything down, and they go to the nuclear power plants to go, hey, turn everything down because we've got too much electricity in the system. And that's the whole idea of all these cars are going to have batteries in them, and it's going to level everything out so evenly. And you get to do that on a micro level, your own personal one, and that can be controlled from a macro level. And then the robo taxis drive your car everywhere, and you don't really need to go anywhere very often because everything's coming to you. I mean, that's obviously going to be the first robo taxis. Will be the cars showing up at your house, and you walk out to the car and pull the groceries out because they don't mind. They're not driving any people around; they're just driving the groceries and the Amazon deliveries. That'll be the start of it, don't you think?
I don't think the trouble is I don't think it's necessary now. Look, one of the things that I used to previously really like about this area of Canada is the McDonald's were all populated by kids. Like it was the teenage kids. I'm like, if you're a teenage kid, that is a good job for you. That McDonald's teaches you how unexcited you're going to be to run to be in that environment for the next 30 years. You're like, this is working for a living. I had all those jobs. I'm like, this is working for a living. This is not easy. I don't know what easy street looks like, and I can't imagine, working a job like that for 8, 10 hours and then coming home and try and take care of your kid for a couple hours and then nightmare. It's nightmare territory, for sure. Um, and I don't want that striation. You know, I don't want that striation in our society. It's great for kids, but as people get older, they need, it's the same thing. You don't want to be 50, 60 and doing manual labor. It's in the cold and in the middle of winter. It's if your kid's fine, but older at sometime bites off. So the current problem is you people running all those services. But I always had this thing. So what screws up the current model? Well, the only thing that screws up the current model is that when that automation comes in, there's not enough things that we react to for people to do anymore, right? And then you get this ever greater pile of people who have nothing to do, and then they just go, society has to work for us. You can't just cast us aside because the robots are doing things. You get all sorts of bad reactions. But the interesting thing that I always had in my head is whenever I'm talking city design with people in the city, I'm like, okay, I want the base floor of every building to contain a restaurant or be able to be converted to a restaurant. And they go, well, why is that, Greg? I'm like, because there's no limit to the number of restaurants. Like, and there's no limit to the number of people who, for some reason, want to build a restaurant, right? Like, this is people's dream. It's people's dream to stop doing what they're doing and create a restaurant, right? People, as far as I can tell, like restaurants. They go there. It's a good experience, right? It's an even experience. Someone's giving you food. You're giving the money. You're tipping your server. You don't have to clean the dishes, and there's a weird efficiency to it too. That's the other thing. The dishes are all being cleaned in a $6,000 industrial dishwasher in 2 minutes instead of yours at home that takes 3.5 hours. It's whisper quiet. It takes 3.5 hours. Um, the food is being massed out, the purchasing is being mastered. There's a lot of creepy efficiencies in that model, right? And I see no reason why you can't have a thing where people are like, "Hey, it's Wednesday, let's walk out to the restaurant." That can go on as far as I can see with no max. You see what I mean? You could employ. There's people who want to do that. There's people that want to go to the restaurant. There's a creepy efficiency to it, and to me, that can just go on. That will scale infinitely. You'll never hit a part where the restaurant hits a thing, and I can't imagine a society where people are like,
Well, you're using the word infinitely wrong there, but yeah.
well, my point is it can scale. It's not infinite, obviously. Nothing's infinite. Well, I mean, things are infinite, but this isn't. You're right. But my point is another problem will intrude way before this becomes the problem, right? And there's several other things like that. And the thing is, what you're pointing at is transit's kind of that too, right? The cheaper it is, the more people, the cheaper and the easier it is, the more places people go, and that's what that Elon Musk thing solves, right? He's like, well, this is gonna. If you think it was cheap before, watch this, right? Watch it. Watch what it could be when you take the person out, right? I've never thought the robotaxi thing is going to happen because I think you're going to get a shattering, right? The technology. A lot of people want private vehicles because they will just whatever it'll get marketed to them. They'll have different size requirements and cargo, and there'll be a lot of corner cases that robo taxis will have trouble solving, like hockey gear for the kids and blah blah blah. So there'll still be a huge number, I think, of private vehicles. Myself, this is
Used Uber? Have you used that?
all the time.
Yeah. I tend to think it's like that, where, I mean, you get to order the kind of car you want. You got your hockey gear, you get a minivan coming to your house, and that's what you jump into. That becomes your solution. You pay a few dollars more for it, or whatever. I tend to think they're probably already well above the human driver's ability, the average human driver's ability, with the robo taxis. Um, the problem is people are too scared to try and embrace new technologies. But those cars don't fall asleep at the wheel. They do get a funny flash of light in their computer sensors, and they have to reset, and something happens exactly at that moment. Somebody steps out in front of the car as it tries to reset, and then you kill somebody. That a person would have solved that problem, but so the robotaxi killed someone that a person would have not killed, but the robotaxi never fell asleep at the wheel, and so it didn't kill the 80 other people. You'll remember the one that it killed because that's on video, because you have videos in the cars, and you won't count up the 80 people that didn't die because you didn't fall asleep at the wheel or were drunk driving or whatever. So it will win, but it will take a long time for us to realize it's won. And then there's a moment it switches over, and then we realize it's one, and then we all relax into it, and we realize that I don't want to get in a car with a human driver anymore.
So the problem is, sorry, Elon, the just to me the neural net system is not going to work, and I've done some deep learning before. The problem with it is essentially all you're doing is training a magic box of voodoo, right? And you're training and training and scolding that magic box of voodoo, and it gets better and better doing what it's doing because you're running. Like, I'll give, for people who are listening, I'll give a brief summary. All the system of deep learning is not like programming. Programming is you sit down and you create a series of instructions that the program follows, and it's deterministic. Unless something goes wrong with the computer, it does the same thing every time, and most of the times it can tell if it's broken. I mean, server systems flag, hey, this memory is not working, and we're done. The problem with and then people said, well, look, this fixed technology does not allow you to do a bunch of things that people do very easily. They identify objects. How does the human brain work, right? And they modeled that with this neuron concept. So basically, what it amounts to currently is you get a gigantic field of numbers. You shove in a digital image, which is just numbers. You get garbage on the output. You get the world's worst driver, right? And then what you do is you keep algorithmically playing with those numbers until eventually the input is well, the car turned left a little, and then it turns left a little more, and then all of a sudden it executes that to your parameters of safety, right? But it is just a gigantic mess of numbers, and the problem is nobody understands those numbers. So for example, when there was the one Tesla accident, people kept saying, oh, there was if I have the, correct me if I'm wrong if I have the incident wrong, but a tractor trailer went across the road. It was white, right? and the Tesla just slammed into it because and then when people would say all the time, oh, well, the problem there is that the computer thought that the top of the transport building was sky. The computer doesn't think anything.
Or a sign over the highway. They have a lot of problems with signs. It's turned into a bit of a corner. It sees a sign. It's static, and they think it might be blocking the road because it's visually looking at this thing, and it's coming from a hill, so it's low. And then the Teslas tend to brake, and then they go, "Oh no, it's just a sign." They go under it. The thing is the Teslas also learn at that GPS coordinate that there's a sign there. And so that they tend to wash that out. They're going, oh, people are braking, or Teslas are braking here, and they're not needed to be braking because there's a sign there. Sure enough, a year from now, there'll be a car sideways right underneath that sign, and the Teslas come up. Well, I don't need to brake. I know I see a sign there. I see something static, and it's going to go right into that car.
No, the problem is that it doesn't perceive or know anything. Right? It's the exact opposite of, let's say, how the computer system works in like a fighter jet, right? So when you have a fighter jet and it's looking at another jet, it bounces a radar signal off and goes, what might that be, right? And then it goes through a deterministic system to go, oh, wait a minute, that is this kind of jet with this kind of radar signal. I'm betting on this is what it is. And it comes to determination of what that thing is. And then as multiple things come into the system, this is why the US military loves LiDAR, by the way, because you get a huge signal rebound. And then if you have unlimited money and resources, you can jam it into a huge computer and you can get lots of interesting data. But the point is, this is a deterministic sort of system where you can come in now and say, well, hold on, this is the signal that came off of this jet, but the computer's making a mistake. And primitively, I'm going to put in an if statement. Well, if this is this and this, you know what I mean? This is not the jet. My point is, a human can make an intervention, see what the program is doing or what modeling the program has applied to all of these different factors and make an intervention, right? It's a deter. And lots of people are trying to do cars like this. They're just struggling, right? If you showed me a computer system which driving around was like, I have triangles on all of the cars, right? I know where the cars are, and this would be the difference. It quickly explains the difference to you. When the U.S. military system is targeting things, right? It knows that objects are permanent in the world. So if it can't see that a frame, it goes, planes can't disappear. That's not possible, right? So it can bet from this frame to this frame, the plane was going this way, and it must be somewhere. See what I'm saying? Like if it's tracking here, and then it loses its mind, or there's a data set dropout, it can extrapolate where it is. It believes that our objects are permanent. Just go watch a Tesla video. It has no idea that objects are permanent because of the algorithm. It can't. So it sees a single frame. It sees a person. The person walks behind a pole, and you'll watch it. The identification rectangle is lost. No person thinks that way. We all do it all. Where did that person go? The one thing 200,000 or 20,000 odd years in this earth have taught modern humans is things don't disappear. That thing behind that sign is somewhere, and it could step out in the road. Maybe it reversed. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere in the world. There's a permanent map of the planet. Now, if you could get things that have the permanent map of the planet and understand where things are going and can make these constructions, and a human can come into the program and understand it, if you notice there's, then that would be, maybe you could get somewhere. I just don't think I don't think you're going to get the neural net, because as I was talking to a university level expert in artificial intelligence, and I was running this by them, I'm like, I just don't think the neural net will ever work, no matter how complicated or how many numbers you make. It's never conscious. It never understands permanency. And that's the basic reasons why it's just not going to be a technology we can widely adopt. He was arguing your point, and I said, but you're still going to get a pack of cigarettes taped to a bird flying across the frame, and it goes crazy. He's like, yeah, you'll still get that, but that'll be so rare that, as you said, the people asleep will die. I just don't buy people will accept the randomness of it.
It was probably 3 years ago. You and I were playing, maybe 4 years ago. You and I were playing frisbee. I think at the nighttime Oakville Ultimate, and we were talking about this, and you were saying he doesn't use lidar. It's never gonna work for him. Lidar is obviously the solution, and he's just using visual. And he's even said lately, I'm not even going to be using the radar. Like he's got radar in his cars because we don't even need that to solve our problems, which even goes more to the opposite of your argument of saying you need lidar. And I remember hearing that. So everything about that comes into my brain anytime I hear anything about him. And when I hear him say, we don't even need radar to do this, I try and rationalize that because I like learning from smarter people than me, and you're a lot smarter than me. And so if I believe this thing to be reasonable and you tell me it different, boy, I've got to challenge that in my own brain because my instinct is to believe you. And you've on numerous occasions proven yourself much more intelligent than me on the unknowns. On the knowns, we challenge each other directly all the time. And so with that, I'm very cognizant of any time Elon Musk talks about it and try and learn about it. And I'm more and more going on Elon Musk's side. And because I'm rationalizing that I drive the car with no radar or no lidar, and I have to use my own intelligence to solve it. So I give you this. What happens if the moment the car sees something strange, somebody steps behind the pole, you know what I mean? And they go, something went away. That pops into somebody who's wearing an Oculus Quest, and they quickly observe the thing and they get the car through that problem. So they're just seeing 18 seconds and they go, no, everything's fine. Okay, go away. And they do that, and they have all these people hired. You're hired to sit there, and all of a sudden, poof, something pops in front of your thing, and you're just driving the car for that car and just making sure, oh, it is a truck turned sideways, upside down, and the computer's not. I'm going to slam on the brakes for them, and you slam on the brakes, and you put them off separately. And so we get 100,000 people who have a job to just be ready to, and every 2 minutes they get 10, 20 seconds worth of stuff to do for the 8 hours that they're doing this job. They're just finalizing it's like the last mile in delivery, the last seconds of unknown in a car. And that's part of the teaching too. And in the end, you go from 100,000 people doing this job to 10,000 people to 1,000 people. And now it almost gets every edge case. You now have, 500 people doing this job permanently for the rest of their life.
So first of all, I don't know that they can't pull it off. I just suspect they won't, right? But it's more than, listen, I would have told you that people in the West would never accept a situation where it was illegal to go visit your friends and family, but you could go to the donut shop. I would have told you that was never going to happen. People would go, I can't visit my friends and family, but I can still get donuts? How does that work? I mean, listen, I think the donut shop should exist. I think it should be open. I'm not attacking that. I'm just saying we've symmetrically, like I would have said, they'll never be able to pick groups and slice it in such a way that we'll accept. We'll just revolt. Point. The kids should go to school. Let's get that straight. The kids can go to school. They should be able to go to school. You can't visit your terminal parents in the hospital. Kids can't visit their terminal parents in the hospital. Because that's like the first thing I pick as like in the hierarchy of things that I'd like people to be able to do. Visiting your terminal parents in the hospital is number one. Even more ridiculous, kids can't do that. That are obviously at the bottom probability of any bad corona outcome. To the point is the argument with them is not the argument about kids is not the kids are in danger. The argument is, well, they could get coronavirus and then give it to someone else, right? That's the argument, right? So if that who their parents are definitionally in the hospital already dying, who are they giving it to exactly? What do you imagine is the do you imagine that coronavirus should be anywhere on these people's radar? Like in the event of somebody dying in the hospital, right? Like you get bigger fish to fry for this period, right? And second to that, I would pick a funeral. I would say people die. I mean, this is just a reality. I don't want to be cavalier about it, but I think it's a big healthy ritual when they do, which is inevitable, that people gather around and say goodbye to this person and these kinds of things. I think these things are important myself. Well,
I don't. I think I just saw an ad on British TV, and it was they come pick up the body and they return you a flask with the ashes. That's it. There's no coffin. There's no picking. There's no nothing.
This is the original. This is the original business, right? The original business was no one would come pick up a dead body in your house, and they still weigh 100. I mean, 110 pounds back in the day, right? It's not easy to get that up and down the stairs, assuming you even have any. So the original business is corpse disposal, right? Nobody wants to do this job, and they'll come in, they take your corpse away, and you pay the money. It's like job number one. We'll know we're truly screwed when that job comes back. But back to the original point. The point is, I would have said all of that stuff was impossible, and it's all here, and it's basically now permanent. It could be depermanented later, but it's now the permanent system. There's no construction where somebody can put their hands up and say, "Excuse me, don't I have rights in Canada?" Yeah, well, hypothetically, well, you hypothetically have rights in China and the Soviet Union and North Korea. All you theoretically have rights there until you clash with something, and then they're poof the magic dragon. So I could be wrong. I'm fully willing to be wrong about maybe they keep expanding the neural network thing out to a level where it goes. But I don't. I just don't think it will happen because I think they'll never be able to seal this determinative issue. Maybe there's people who are way more smarter than me and they've mapped this thing out and they have, got the part of the net that does this thing, and it's not one sheet of numbers. They identify things and they chuck it to another neural network and chuck it to another. So it's not completely a massive field of numbers. I just don't think that solution will ever work because it won't satisfy. We can accept that another human screws up and kills you because we can accept that we make mistakes. So we're gonna have to be tolerant of that. We'll be tolerant of that. The whole somebody runs into you playing a game and you get hurt and you're like, well, that's it, right? You don't go, hey, you know what a solution would be here is to replace all these people with androids. They'll play much more effectively. That won't happen. So listen, it's possible, but I just think you're going to have to wait until the deterministic route's going to take longer. It's more science. It's harder. They have to craft through every edge case. But eventually, those guys, and it's Nissan. If you ever listen to the Nissan guy talk, did this great interview on the old Charlie Rose, in which he was defending this idea, and Nissan guy blew it up. He's like, it's all lidar. Your only problem currently with lidar at the time is it costs $3.5 million or something completely nuts. He's like, but we're going to miniaturize that down, and the moment we do, and he went through all the conditions. He said, here's your problem with any sensor system that you want to pick. Okay, visual's great, it's foggy, you're screwed, right? The fogginess screws the visual system, and forgive me if I butcher this, but the if you have a radar system, works great through the fog, but it gets screwed up in rain. Rain screws that system up, right? And he went through all the trajectories, and he said, so here's how it's going to end. You're going to have sensor fusion. You're going to have a lidar system, whatever other systems lidar is convenient because it solves all these problems, right? Because the U.S. military was never like, this is a great targeting system, but we can't have combat in the rain. They're like, no, we're not developing that. It has to work all the time, right? Has to work in fog. Has to work through all these systems. And I don't know if lidar has rain problems or not, but the point is, his point was that you're going to have the advantage that you're essentially going to use is the fact that you can get these sensory perceptions from the technology that humans don't have, and that's where you're going to drive the advantage because every human is a crappy driver in fog, right? Like if you were
Drive in fog. I mean, I've got no problem with Tesla pulling over in fog if it's thinking that I pull over in fog if I'm nervous and think I can't see people turning left in front of me.
But if you just imagined a car, and you could turn a button and it flipped up a black and white lidar image of what it could see in the fog, you'd be like, I can drive 100 kilometers an hour. It just looks like a black and white photo of things. You can see everything. It might take your brain a little bit to adjust to it. Oh, and getting back to your previous point about the can we have someone zip in at the last minute? That's interesting. I think that's an interesting idea. You built the neural network to declare. The problem is it doesn't necessarily know it's failure mode, but
you built the SpaceX too to have the low latency to be able to snap that in. That's the other thing you built.
The latency is not the problem. right? The computers are way faster than people, right? The problem is that when it's framing, right? So like we're sitting here talking, you know who I am. If I snapped my fingers and you were on a space station in a spacesuit, you know, with a wrench all of a sudden, right? The amount of time that it takes for your brain to reframe every single thing in the environment and figure out what's going on is a long time. I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's a long time. And the book that put me onto this was a book, How to Survive Everything. And this book had all these situations like you're falling from an airplane, your hot air balloon goes down, and it's like MacGyver in all of these things. Like you're like, I'm never going to be pull this off, but it's a fun read, right? All of these situations. Oh, you're drowning in a boat, your parachute goes in the water, and like just you're in the woods alone. You know, situation after situation after situation. This obviously very robust gentleman wrote this book, and he's like, you know, kung fu fighting and all these ways through all these things. And then it was like it went to this chapter, you're being mugged. It's like, it's over, give them your money. There's like nothing. He was like, there's no option. You're never gonna do it. And the question is why? And the answer was because when you're sitting there at the ATM or walking down the street, right? You have whatever frame you have in your head, but you don't have the paranoia, I'm about to be robbed, unless you're psychotic, right? Like you can't keep this paranoia up. Eventually you're just going about your life, right? The robber is planning to rob you. So they get a 30-second head start on the incident. They've organized their brain, you know, what they're going to do. They're like, I'm going to do this. And if this happens, I'm going to do this. And if I hear a cop, I'm going to run. And if this guy looks like he's got a gun, I'm out of here. You know, whatever the situations are, they've organized this whole thing in your brain. And I can't remember the exact number, but I think they were saying it takes, before you're completely re-engaged in the new situation, is like 20 to 30 seconds. Like 5 seconds, you're, oh, I'm being robbed. You know what I mean? And you're out. The guy's out. He's out before you ever get.
Snap your fingers and I'm on the space station with a wrench. Totally get it, because I'm not expecting to be on the space station with a wrench. Now, say, Jeff, I'm going to snap my fingers, and in 10 seconds, you're going to be somewhere and you got to figure out a life and death solution to a problem. Okay, now I got a whole bunch. You just gave me a ton of stuff to prepare. Now I'm on the space station with a wrench in my hand. I'm going, okay, how do I solve my problem? Rather than going, when the frick am I? You know what I mean? This is ridiculous that I'm breathing through this. I got this head thing on. If your job is to get poof, now you're sitting there looking, and there's somebody standing behind a telephone pole, and you're looking, everything looks good, or you see a car upside down in the middle of the street, and you go, oh nope, I'm applying the brakes immediately. If you're ready for, I'm about to get a car image, and 99% of the time these are safe, 1% of the time you better react quickly, because the guy's sleeping in the car. The car may not even have a steering wheel in it for anybody to help react it. So you're just going, poof, brake. Oh no, it was fine. Okay. A kid had already run across, and the other kids aren't running across. Okay, just go through. I'm looking, they're looking around because they've got all the cameras in their Oculus Quest, and they go, okay, we're through. Close. Now that goes on to the next one, and 3 minutes later, another one pops up in their head. It's different than me popping something into your eyes right now, and you're meant to be driving a car and finishing the last second of a problem. There's no problem with that.
No. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. If you're preed into all the different conditions, I just don't think you'll. I mean, again, this could work. I'm not saying it won't work, but my top of the, my napkin says the timing will, the two problems with this will, the timings will be too tight, right? And keep in mind, like when you're in an accident, because I was in one highway speed accident, which I was hit from behind, right? Like the time dilation in the human brain is amazing. You have all the time in the world. You're like, oh look, I'm going to hit that curb, and you're like, you're just like, I'm going to hit it, and you're like, you're trying to do what you can with the wheel, but you're like, I'm going to smack like that. I'm definitely going to hit that, and you got a good in your head 10-15 seconds, and you're like going through the whole thing. But if you watch one of the accidents, it's like the whole thing just executed in 3 seconds, right?
So you're not going to stop those. You're not going to solve somebody hitting you from behind accident. You're going to solve the boulder rolling down the hill and crushing your car. And anybody who pops in and solves that, but you're dead anyways, whether you're driving a car or whether you've got a computer driving your car. So those kind of cases, you have the accident, you will die, and that's the solution to your problem. That's it.
Right. No, no. But I'm just saying again, could work. I think the two problems you'll have is it'll take too long to it just by the time we switch, get a person's frame, it's just 3 seconds. I mean, just 3 seconds. Like the accident is too far gone to intervene now. And two, the computer will have a problem picking the error condition when it should signal. I mean, it thinks everything. My point is, I think that it doesn't think anything. That's my point. But the output of the neural network was never concerned like through the whole thing. It was like we're driving on a blue day. What happened to the top of the Tesla? I don't know. It's fine. And and I think actually that one drove like another mile. It's like, well, it's fine.
It's at such a level that you're probably going, we don't need to be talking about this, but I'm on the precipice of buying a Tesla. And I was not considering buying full self driving initially. And now I am considering, not because of this conversation, in the past maybe 3 weeks. I only think about that. It might be $50,000 to buy full self driving soon, and you're grandfathered in when you buy it now. And I've just made a wonderful investment if that's,
It's priced in US dollars.
yeah.
Then you should buy it now.
Oh, you're thinking the Canadian US dollar.
Yeah, you can't because as you said, this is just like I don't think you have to get in conspiracy theories on this one. The States has this they have this frontier spirit. It's like we're going. You know what I mean? And they're just going to build back up. There's carnivals in Texas. There's restaurant. There's like Florida looks like a spring break 24/7. And the United States, just in my, this is again a gross generalization, but when I have had interaction in the States, I've lived down the States, I've worked down the States, and you run into someone and say something like, I was in this one little town and this was 20 years ago, so hopefully this was cleaned up. The bakery would just open these yeast vents and the whole town would smell like yeast. Like I'm not kidding, like miles around. I'm like, this can't be good for anyone. And when you mentioned it to anyone, they're like, could they not do this? They'd be like, listen, people got to work. They got to eat bread. This is how I'm like, okay, I got it. You're into the yeast smell. Like, I give up. I'll adapt to the yeast smell. And that was the attitude. And there's a reason why the productivity is higher in the States. Like they have the highest productivity. There's a reason why people go to Silicon Valley. There's a reason why, Elon Musk is there and not in Canada. This is not some randomness. There's just a culture down there of we're going to do this thing. Like Elon Musk is nuts. He's like, we're going to take a garbage can, okay, and with rockets on the bottom, get it to go up and down like a science fiction film. I would have told you straight out that was never going to happen, but he's made it happen. I would have been like, what? Like, have you lost your mind?
It looks like a garbage can, doesn't it? It's hilarious. You never thought it was that thin. You never thought it was that thin and like it really looks like a tin foil rocket.
It's like if you brought this to my science fiction film, I'd like put some fins on that. No one's ever going to buy this. Could we not have vestigial fins? No one's going to buy that anyone would ever get in this thing to go to Mars. No windows? They're never going to accept that. They need a window. Come on. It's like, no, we'll put screens and cameras. It'll be fine. They'll be like, no one's ever going to do this. If you notice every science fiction film, no matter how flung out, what do you notice? Windows everywhere, floor to ceiling windows, every shot. Apparently you get spacefaring and then you're like, well, now that we're spacefaring, we need a lot more windows. People have to be able to see outside of this thing into the blackness of space. The view of every window looks the same. We're aware of that for like all of the journey. It's the same. Then for 3 seconds while landing, if the thing doesn't crack, and 3 seconds taking off, it's cool. The rest of the time, you just see stars, But no, it's all windows, right? And so, listen, good on him. I mean, listen, you need people like that. He's making it work. He's making tons of stuff work that I would never have said work. And I mean, minus the rocketry, the rest of the stuff is not even fantastic science. He's just like, people are overcharging for building tunnels. It's not that hard. It's
Right.
yeah. I mean, the rest of the stuff is not is not, whatever, right? And um listen, there is, but here, just to sidetrack the whole conversation to something else. I don't think I don't even think they're working on a problem that needs solved, right? Because all we really need to solve is highway driving. That's really just it. If you could create things, we don't even need to go to exotic technology. If you could create things with some kind of neural network, some kind of looking out, you can use that technology, and even had to go with the metal track, the cable. You wouldn't have to do it nowadays, but the old idea would be you'd put a magnetic cable down the track, right? We're trying to build these computer systems to deal on these human road systems. Where I'm like, I have an idea. Why don't we just take an ultraviolet paint can and put a line down the highway? Because the Tesla will be able to see that, people won't, and it could just we could you could make markings for all of the things it needed to know. You could build a standard language to it. It could be like, well, I can't, what you said is too foggy. I can't see my markings. It could GPS remember the markings. Like, all you have to do is take the highway system and come in with a couple adaptations so that the robot cars can get by on the highway. And it strikes me 99% of your problem is solved right there. Get on the highway, you go to sleep for 3 hours, beep, beep, beep. You gotta get off the highway.
Considering a full self driving, it works in the highways. And if I'm coming back, and right now it does work in the highways. And the idea is if I'm coming back to Ontario often and I have full self driving, that makes that trip just a lot easier for me. Like
Saving the listen, the part where I will completely grant you is that, if the way it's implemented currently, I don't know how aggressive it is, but it tries to beep you to keep your hands on the wheels and all these, kind of weird things. But if you build a system where you're driving and then it sees that you've fallen asleep, or it sees that you're going into the guardrail, or these conditions that are 10 seconds long, we're drifting into the guardrail, like this person is not stopping. Like, all the cars now have, for example, like they can't conceive of a system in which you're intentionally attempting to ram another vehicle. They're like, there's no use case for that. So we'll just build a radar system, and when we see this thing creeping up, we'll pre-arm the brakes, right? We'll bring the brake pads right down so they're just skimming that rotor, so that when you put the brake on, there's no delay, right? That stuff is great, and the car can start braking. You know what I mean? And one guy will be like, "Well, I couldn't get out of this high speed chase because it refused to ram, the terrorist vehicle on the way out." Well, sorry, you know that one we're just going to have to live with, because we can't solve all of these can't solve all these problems. Just to take the conversation full back, you wanted to mention doctors, the doctor situation before we wrap up.
so that's one of the things in Hamilton. There's like I said, a hospital in every corner. And here you can't find a family doc. You're on a waiting list for 3 years to try and get one. So I would suggest if you're a family doc in Ontario and you want a nicer way of life, come out this way, and you'd have people just jamming you up to be a family doc for them. So what they've done, which is really nice, for me, I think it's a perfect solution, because you can go and everything can be done on the internet, a video call like this, and you talk to docs. The whole medical system's built up to be able to do it. And you can go to a pharmacist and they're able to fill out prescriptions for you. You've got to pay them, I don't know, $18 or something like that to do the actual filling. But they will, you go up to them and you say, I want this because I know I used to have this rash and I need this for the rash. And they go, oh, so you know the side effects of this? Yep, I do. You've taken this before? Yes, I have. Okay. And the pharmacist fills out a prescription for you, because you can't get family docs very easy here. That's just a normal way of things happening. And so they've sort of changed the rules to make it easier. And I like the idea of calling a doc up rather than getting an appointment and a month and a half later showing up, and then the thing that was bugging you isn't even bugging you anymore, and you don't even remember why it was bugging you so much you wanted to have a doctor's appointment for it anyway. You call like you're immediate, like, my elbow was really bugging me, and only when I do this, I go, oh, that's because you're throwing a frisbee wrong, or whatever the point is. I'd rather have it immediate and not perfect than delayed and close to perfect. And that's what you get here.
I mean, but it's also back to the. I mean, we're going away from this, but it's back to the weirdo centralized, accreditization, where it's like, well, we're the medical. We say what a doctor can and can't do, and there's this pharmacist, and the pharmacist what they can and can't do, and everyone is wants their turf, right? Like because the livelihood of the membership is kind of tied to this mechanical thing, right? Like in lots of places you get unauthorized dentists, right? Just dentists in many communities in the states that just they don't have credentials, they power up and they service a different community. And the there's two forms of complaints. The first form of complaint is this person is ripping people off. Uh, um, I had great, good. Put a stop to that. You know what I mean? To malpractice and the second complaint is, well, this guy's doing fine, but they're not accredited. They didn't come in through the right channel. They don't have the right paperwork. Everyone's happy with their dentistry because we poured through all their patients trying to, you know what I mean, make this case of incompetence. Didn't really find it. It's just they don't have the right paperwork. And I'm like, and the solution is because they operated, dentistry, but didn't have the right paperwork. We should ban them from the field of dentistry, in this prefecture. It's like, okay, well, and it's when they need the dentists out in this thing, this is when people become, why can't we credential group B to do the thing? You know what I mean? If the thing can't happen because we don't have enough people, well then someone with some training is better than you know people trying to do their own. I don't understand why there wouldn't be more doctors out there, because it seems to me that the initial problem with being a doctor is setting up your initial practice. Once your practice is rocking and rolling, you're fine, right? The cost should be low. I assume that a building and these kinds of things are less hard to come by. It would seem to be an ideal thing to do, but maybe it's not where the action is. I don't know. What would be the I don't know if you know this or not, but with the doctor, would there be sort of like a surgery problem if you want like
I would think you're not going to get near as good of any kind of. You have a heart attack here, and I'd be way more nervous that I say they're about 30 years behind on just general. I wouldn't say medical specifically, but on the bubble wrapping of society. I go out my street and there's a yield sign to the next major street, and there's a stop sign to get onto the major street, but everywhere else is all yields. They've changed that in Ancaster, where I was living. Every single corner is now a stop sign because somebody complained that cars go around a corner too fast or something. And lots of T intersections that used to be yields just aren't. And over here, it seems like it's 30 years ago where they just go, just be reasonable, do it right. The street in front of my house, they never sand it or salt it. So the plow comes in, plows it out. And what's really nice is after a day or two, the sun beats down and it's all dry, and the snow is nice and white all winter long. So it's not, how dirty the snow gets in 2 days, and it looks awful. Here, the winter looks beautiful outside because everything always looks nice and white. And that seems to be what they did 30 years ago. Now, because somebody slips on the ice that's left by the plow, we have to snow it, we have to salt it, then we have to sand it, and we have to bubble wrap it for everybody. And it's just not what they did. I had a phone call, and to show you how backwards it is, I'm talking to the Bell Alliant, I guess it is, for my internet, and she goes, "Oh, before I can go any further, I'm going to have to ask you some security questions." I'm like, "Okay, this is great." She goes, "Is your name Jeff Eleveld?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Do you live at 122 Jones Street?" I went, "Yes." And she goes, "Okay, good. Now I can access your account." And she asked me the question. I only had to say yes. But it shows you how they're 30 years old in their mentality of, well, I just got to make sure I'm talking to the right guy. He'll tell me the right answer. Like that was.
it's even the 10 years ago they call up, they're looking for your wife, and you say, well, I'm Mr. So and so, and they start talking like, you're good enough, you answered the phone, you said you're, you know reasonably connect the husband or wife of this person. So we'll just start talking.
They use the logic from 30 years ago, and I tend to think that's going to evolve to the hospitals. And I mean, they'll be up on new things, but their procedures of what do we do with a potential heart attack? Well, get a sample of his blood, find what enzymes. Like, they'll follow all the general rules, but you'll have somebody who'll know edge case stuff way easier in Hamilton than you would here.
I mean, it just makes sense that, if you're the person doing a certain type of operation and you're doing that operation every day, in a tighter spectrum, you're going to get better at that operation than a generalist. I mean, no one can solve that, right? Unless you get the whole robotic medicine going. But Elon, you're doing enough things. So just leave the robotic medicine to someone else. Someone else will work on it.
Hopefully he doesn't listen to this podcast and start another company.
Is in that guy's head. He looks like, see him on Joe Rogan. The guy's like, he's like pounded down. He's like, I've sold all my houses. And Joe Rogan's like, why are you selling your houses? Like, well, people are upset. Why are you on Twitter? Like, the minute you're involved in revolutionizing automobile transit and spacefaring, we'll give you the boring company. You don't need Twitter. There's nothing on Twitter for you, Elon. He needs write-only Twitter where he can write messages but can read nothing.
Did you see the last time he was on?
I saw a clip of it, yeah.
So this was really strange because I like Joe Rogan a lot, and he's seems to be a guy who really wants to learn stuff. And he was talking about how they're vertically landing the rockets and and Joe Rogan goes, what? He goes, yeah, no, like when we bring them down. And Joe Rogan goes, you do that? And he goes, yeah, like Elon Musk is going, how do you not know this? So Jamie goes and pulls up a video, and they're landing them vertically on the boat and on the land. And he goes, wow, that's great. And I'm going, how does Joe Rogan not have come across this in his quest for knowledge that he does? And it was shocking. Elon, he's like, I'm talking to a guy who doesn't know we vertically land our rockets, and that's what differentiates us from, like, you saw that he was like, took Joe Rogan down some pegs in his head because he really had Joe Rogan pegged up.
Yeah, but that's a nature of the that's just the nature of the of the seeky internet, where it's giving you things that it knows that you're going to click on, right? It just doesn't know. You can see the algorithms are so good that they know whatever. And I mean, you would think that the algorithm would be like, Joe Rogan's interested in everything. I mean, it's just a different thing every day. But it knows that of those concepts, he's most interested in MMA, or he's associated with these three things. It just thinks this science fiction video is not I'm not into it. And I think that the general media, like, vertically landing one of those rockets should honestly be like a front page story on all the newspapers. Like, the first time anyone's pulled it off, it looks like it's from space. I mean, it looks like a bad science fiction movie that had this rocket landed in a way that I never would have thought they would have got it. I never would have thought, not that they couldn't do it done, because you could have explained the science to me, and I've been like, well, that's deterministic science. There's no neural network involved in that. That'll be fine. But I would have said, they're going to have trouble collecting the capital, and we're going to build this thing, and it's just too far away. It's like the windowless spacecraft. He's like, this is what we need to get this done. It's going to be too far away for people, right? I know. I mean, they've gotten it to go. They've shown this thing's going to work. They're launching real satellites. They're ahead on all these. They're just ahead, right? And so, more power to them. But I can see how it doesn't think this is relevant. It just, the algorithms, that the places he's looking. I mean, he's got the same phone, as everybody else. They don't have a special Joe Rogan, calculator, and it's more locked in. So this brings me actually to the last topic about this, the Joe Rogan locked in business, and that is, I was looking at the Locals website. Have you seen this Locals website? It's Dave Rubin and some other things retake on social media, and it's a little bit interesting because it has you log on, and immediately it's like, well, what communities do you want to be part of? And each one of these communities, like a show or a person or a personality. And then you pick that community, And it's like, boom, if you want to be, you can see the things, but if you want to comment, it's like, boom, you got to subscribe to this community, like right off the bat. It's like, how badly do you want to comment here? Are you willing to pay $2 a month to comment here? Are you willing? And they have different amounts, and it's really crazy. But it's right off the bat. It's like, nope. If you want to comment on this thing, you have to be part of the community, and you have to pay this amount of money to be part of this thing. And then I'm sure people, are polite, right? And are more respectful because you're not anonymous now, and nobody wants to get kicked out of this community that they're apparently simultaneously willing to pay $2 a month for. So it's a complete flip the script. I don't know. I'm not sold that this can beat or impact Twitter, but it's an interesting reversal. But to your point about the Joe Rogan doesn't know, the first thing that occurred to me is I'm like, this is way more sequestered because now we're under the community leadership of some guy who's more caught in, right?
Oh yeah, no, you're fed the food you want to eat, and that's the only food you know, and that's what happens on the internet. That's why the left and the right are so separate. Almost everybody's somewhere in the middle. There's 10% of the people are really far right and really far left, and 80% of the people are just going, I sort of get and I sort of get, and but you're on one of the two teams, and that's it. And they've really done a good job politically of convincing you that both parties are the opposite when both parties are exactly the same.
But anyway, I think we should wrap it up there.
Awesome.
Next podcast we'll do global warming.
Oh, I'd love to do global warming.
So thanks for being on the program. Is there any contact information or anything you'd like to shill?
Jeff.eleveld@gmail.com is my email address. I'm the only Jeff Eleveld in Canada, I think. I'm pretty sure. There's another Jeff Eleveld in the States. He's my cousin in Connecticut. But Eleveld is E-level-D. That's how you spell it.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Talk to you later.